Welcome to the story of Gideon. Remember Gideon? You don't? Well, Gideon was kind of an interesting choice. When the preacher wrote his chapter 11 about faith in his letter to the Hebrews, Gideon was an interesting choice. By faith is the theme. By faith was our theme, has been our theme during the whole Lenten season. We've been taking our cue from this chapter 11, where the preacher presents a whole long list of Old Testament prophets. A long chain of faith, a chain of faith that includes you and me, leading to the promise of a new life in Jesus Christ. So, why Gideon? Noah, Abraham, Moses, they were well-known heroes of faith. But Gideon? Here's the situation. Ancient Israel had once again lost all track of her identity as God's chosen people, and they had strayed after foreign gods. As a result, foreign tribes were encroaching on her territory and terrorizing the people. This time, God chooses Gideon, an insignificant son of an obscure family, to lead the Israelites into battle and to chase out the invaders. God always has had the custom of choosing the last and the least for his most important work. Gideon, rightly, worries that God is out of his divine mind to choose him. Or maybe it isn't even really God. So he devises a couple of tests. There's nothing wrong with this. It was not a lack of faith. It was customary in those days for military leaders in any culture to look for signs to see whether their God or any God was with them and whether they were going to have a victory. We still do that, don't we? We knock on wood. We avoid the cracks in the sidewalk. We check out constellations. Baseball players and fans have all kinds of signs and superstitions. God was not offended in Gideon's case. Gideon made a deal. He laid out some wool overnight, and in the morning the wool was quite wet and the ground around it was dry. Not that surprising. So the next night he reverses it, and sure enough, in the morning the wool is dry, and the ground all around it is wet. He was good to go. You can read the rest of Gideon's amazing adventures in Judges 6 and 7, but the point is made right here. At the end of the whole story, the victory is won, the land is cleared of the enemy, but not by poor, terrified Gideon. In fact, when we first met Gideon, he was hiding in a wine press threshing grain. He was so afraid of being found. The victory was not won by Gideon or by Gideon's dramatically reduced army. They never even went into the enemy camp. They danced around with torches and loud noisemakers and scared everyone away. The victory was God's alone, who chose someone like Gideon exactly to show by contrast who God was and is, whose victory it was. That's the point of the story. Gideon was all too fallible, actually, like most ordinary people. After all the fighting was done, the people wanted Gideon to be king and his sons after him. Oh no, Gideon righteously insisted, I will not rule over you, and my son will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you. But then he completely messed up by having all his soldiers each give him one of their gold earrings, the spoils of battle. And with that wealth, he had a huge, gorgeous banner made, and all the people prostituted themselves to it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and to his family. So, when the preacher is writing to the Hebrews about faith, two things are true. The first is that God knows that we are both faithful and fallible. Even so, we are the ones through whom God chooses to work. God knows our faith and builds it up in the course of our working, of his working through us. Second, it is God who is faithful. God does not give up on us. God is patient. We are the ones with our wavering faith who nevertheless have been chosen to be God's hands in the world. And one more thing. In this 11th chapter of Hebrews, the preacher is describing a long line of faith that leads to the Messiah, Jesus Christ. It sometimes is called the chain of faith. The preacher points out that the chain was incomplete after all the faithful prophets had been listed. Why? It was in order to make room for us to join the chain. This is the chain of faith I mentioned at the beginning. Those Old Testament figures, each of them filled with faith and also distinctly flawed, did not receive what they thought was the promise. Noah died in a certain amount of disgrace. Abraham himself had only 2 sons, Ishmael and Israel, and Isaac. Moses saw the Holy Land but never crossed into it. After Gideon died, the people of Israel went right back to their evil ways. They did not receive what was promised, says the preacher, but not because they were flawed. Instead, because of God's faithfulness, God provided something infinitely better, namely Jesus Christ, the perfecter of our faith. And we will join them in that chain of faith. Through Christ, they will be made perfect with us. Thanks be to God. Amen.